When my husband left the house that evening, he didn't even bother giving a proper explanation. Just a rushed sentence about important work, and a half-hearted glance toward me before grabbing his keys and disappearing. I stood there for a moment, wondering how a man could become such a stranger inside his own home. For months he had been drifting away, not with loud arguments or dramatic fights, but with quiet distance that settled heavier each day. Conversations between us had become shallow, our meals silent, and our nights separate. I tried convincing myself that work stress was changing him, but deep down I knew something was wrong. That day, his excitement to leave and his insistence on checking his phone every few minutes made the truth harder to ignore. I tried distracting myself with chores, but loneliness lingered in every corner of the house. Every little sound reminded me of what my marriage used to be: warm, predictable, filled with effort from both sides. Now, even the sound of his footsteps had become irregular, echoing like someone who lived here out of obligation rather than affection. I sat on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall, wondering how long one woman was supposed to keep pretending everything was fine. The door suddenly opened, and my son walked in earlier than usual. His presence brought comfort, but he had a seriousness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He dropped his bag and came closer, studying my face like he already knew I wasn't okay. He asked if Dad had left again. I nodded, trying to sound casual, but he noticed the tremble in my voice. He sat beside me quietly, letting the silence do the talking. He had always been more observant than most boys his age, always noticing small shifts in people's behavior. I didn't want to burden him with adult problems, but tonight his eyes kept drifting toward me with concern, almost as if he was holding something back. His voice softened as he asked if Dad had been acting strange lately. Something in the way he said it made my heart beat faster. That I tried dismissing his question, but he placed his hand on mine, steady and warm. He whispered that he had noticed things too. Unexpected late nights, unexplained phone calls, and changes in my husband's mood that didn't feel normal. My chest tightened because hearing my own doubts spoken by my son made them feel more real than ever. I finally admitted that I had been feeling uneasy for weeks, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. He looked down for a second, gathering courage, then lifted his eyes and told me he needed to talk to me about something important. A seriousness settled between us, heavier than anything we had discussed before. My breath caught as he leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the walls might be listening. He said he hadn't come home early by accident. He had been looking for the right moment to talk, and tonight felt like the moment I needed to hear the truth. I felt a cold shiver travel through me. Before I could speak, he gently squeezed my hand and said, "Mom, you need to sit down. There's something I saw today about Dad, and you deserve to know it." I froze when he said that, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The way he spoke, careful, controlled, almost trembling, told me this wasn't something small. I lowered myself onto the sofa, and he sat beside me, his shoulders tense as if he had been carrying the weight of this truth alone for too long. He took a long breath before he finally said the words that made my entire world shift. He told me he had followed his father earlier that day, not because he wanted to spy, but because he couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling he'd had for weeks. He said he saw Dad meet someone, a woman, and not in a way coworkers or friends meet. In a way that made him sick to his stomach. I stared at him, stunned, hoping I had misheard him. But he went on, describing how he watched from a distance as his father walked up to her with a smile he hadn't shown at home in months. How he held her waist like he used to hold mine. How they got into a car together, laughing, leaning close, completely unaware that someone who loved me more than anything was standing there watching. Every word was like a stab, cutting deeper than the last. My son's eyes were filled with anger and hurt, not just for me but for himself, for having to witness something no child should ever see. That I tried to speak, but my voice trembled. I asked him if he was sure, begging for any possible mistake. He shook his head slowly, firmly, as tears welled in his eyes. He explained how he had suspected something long before today. How the late nights, the lies, the sudden interest in extra meetings at odd hours weren't adding up. He said he had tried to ignore it, hoping it was all in his head. But today he couldn't ignore it anymore. Today he saw the truth. I covered my face with my hands, unable to contain the heartbreak that poured out of me. My son wrapped his arm around me, trying to hold me together while he himself was breaking inside. He told me he didn't want to hurt me, but he couldn't let me keep believing in a lie. He said he had been trying to protect me from the pain he feared this truth would bring, but watching me suffer in silence was worse. Hearing him say that made my chest tighten with guilt and gratitude. I never imagined my child would be the one shielding me from a betrayal I should have sensed myself. I asked him how long he'd known, and he whispered that he had seen hints for weeks but didn't want to believe his own father could do something like that. He confessed that seeing it with his own eyes was the only thing that forced him to accept it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the house itself was mourning. Then he reached into his pocket and hesitated, his fingers trembling. He said there was something else, something more I needed to see. My heart sank deeper because the truth I had already heard felt unbearable. But the way he looked at me told me the next truth would hurt even more. He placed his hand over mine and whispered, "Mom, what Dad did today isn't the only thing. There's something else you must know." I felt my stomach twist as he pulled out his phone and showed me the messages, photos, and videos he had captured. Each image was a punch to the heart, undeniable proof of my husband's betrayal. I couldn't look away, even though every second tore me apart inside. There he was, the man I had trusted, laughing with another woman, touching her in ways that belonged only to our marriage. I could feel my son's eyes on me, worried I might collapse, and I did, a quiet sob escaping as the reality sank in. The house felt colder, emptier, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment to break. I had suspected, but suspicion is one thing. Seeing the undeniable truth is another entirely. I couldn't stop replaying the images in my mind, each one a vivid reminder of the lies I had been living with. My son sat beside me, steady and resolute, offering the only support I could lean on. He kept whispering reassurances, reminding me that I wasn't alone and that I didn't deserve this. Anger started bubbling up inside me, fierce and raw. How could he do this? How could the person who vowed to love and protect me treat me like this, with such disregard for everything we had built? I felt a mix of betrayal, humiliation, and disbelief. The tears flowed freely, but my son's calm presence gave me strength I didn't know I had left. We talked quietly but intensely. He reminded me that silence had allowed this to continue for too long. I realized he was right. There had been signs I ignored, dismissing them as paranoia or imagining the worst. I thought of the subtle changes in his behavior, the nights he came home late claiming work, the sudden secrecy over phone calls and messages. All of it pointed to the sound of the front door opening made my heart skip a beat. My son and I froze, knowing he had come home earlier than expected. I felt a surge of dread as I saw him step inside, and the tension in his shoulders immediately told me he knew something was wrong. He didn't look at me, didn't greet me. His eyes darted nervously around the room as if expecting someone else to appear. I realized he wasn't alone. The other woman was with him, standing just behind, pretending to be casual, but the moment our eyes met, the truth became undeniable. Every instinct in my body screamed betrayal, and yet my son remained calm, firm, like he was ready to defend me no matter what. I finally found my voice and asked him what he thought he was doing. His answer was slow, awkward, filled with excuses that sounded hollow even as he spoke them. My son, standing protectively between us, held up the evidence, messages, photos, and the video that proved what I already knew. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, but his presence was enough to make my husband falter. He tried gaslighting, accusing me of overreacting, pretending that nothing significant had happened, but the weight of the proof was undeniable. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow swell inside me, realizing that the man I had trusted had spent months hiding his betrayal. Thinking I would never discover the truth, my son insisted I deserved to hear the full story, to face the reality without fear. I confronted him, demanding answers, asking why, how long, and who. His responses were weak, scattered, meaningless against the gravity of his actions. I could see the cracks forming in his composure, the panic as he realized the control he had over the narrative was gone. The other woman shifted uncomfortably, her presence a silent reminder of the destruction he had caused. Every lie he had told, every late night, every excuse, collapsed in an instant under the truth we held before him. I finally felt the anger rise to its peak, No longer restrained by fear or hesitation, I told him that the marriage we had built on trust was over, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I refused to allow this betrayal to continue defining my life. My son stayed beside me, reinforcing my decision, giving me the strength to take a stand. My husband tried one last time to salvage the situation, pleading, promising, begging, but nothing could undo the damage. I remained resolute, feeling the weight lift slightly as I reclaimed control over my own life. He left, knowing he had lost the respect and love that had once been his, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. My son hugged me tightly, whispering that we would be okay. And in that moment, I realized that strength and honesty could heal wounds betrayal thought would never close.